Hi, welcome to the Careers Unfiltered podcast with Mentoria. You may know your dream job, you may know your dream career, but do you know what goes on behind the scenes in your chosen career path? Have you been able to separate the glamour from the reality in your career? Do you know the good, the bad, and the ugly in your career? Most people walk into their careers without having any idea in terms of what really happens in that career, how to crack success, how to get the right job, how to grow in the career. Don't be those people. Get the ins and outs of your career path through some of the best subject matter experts and industry professionals that Mentoria will bring to you on the Careers Unfiltered podcast.
I haven't even covered, let's say, 10% of it. Industrial version of khadi manufacturing, which they started calling as khadi denim. Revival of the craft will happen, but that revival of that mindset will happen. I mean, they're obviously interlinked because, fashion cannot be created without using textiles. And unless you're creating sculptures in clothing, but um, textile particularly doesn't really rely on fashion because textile is something we use anywhere. Like, although we have a very, in general sense, we have a very myopic point of view that textile is only related to clothing or home furnishings. But in the larger scheme of things, textile is applicable everywhere, to your car seats, to uh, carpets in the aeroplane, or let's say even in terms of medical science right now. Like, there are some textiles intervention where they are developing technologies to replicate your arteries, or things like those with sort of mesh kind of materials. So textile per se is a very, very broad field where yeah, so I'll again, I think, divide it in both the things. So if anybody trying to take a more commercially viable and a more industrial route, I mean, textile design obviously will give you a lot of options to choose either from the handicrafts or the industrial textile techniques and all of those things. So I think signing up at a bachelor's level or at a master's level in a textile design course will more or less give you the same information. That's another thing to see. Let's say you haven't done bachelor's in textiles, but you are now interested and you're planning to pursue a master's in textiles. So it's not compulsory that you must have a bachelor's, because in masters also they are open to people um, who are from different backgrounds, and they sort of like give them a crash course in, let's say, the first or the second semester or the whole first year, which sort of covers all your basics of textiles, and then you sort of go deeper into the kind of direction you want to take, whether industrial or handcraft. And in bachelor's, again, because it's a longer course, so again you have both the options to dive into, and you have all the time in the world to explore both the sides of things. Uh, but let's say somebody is very, very keen on the industrial version of textiles, or let's say how textile manufacturing happens, and how they can design with using latest technology, latest machinery, to reduce time and cost and increase productivity. Then there are courses which are around textile technology in all engineering institutes around the country and the world. So textile technology, they do dabble and, like, have modules around design as well. But then they also, their major focus then revolves around what kind of is the latest machinery or latest innovation in the textile sector. And, how can we, let's say, uh, not just create fancy fabrics or, fancier textiles, but also more industrially viable or more practical textiles. So, like, I gave an example initially in our conversation about textiles being prevalent in, let's say, aircrafts, automobiles, any kind of automobiles, or even, let's say, in hospitals. People are wearing scrubs in hospital. People are wearing gloves in hospital. People are using those curtains. There are curtains in our house. There are curtains in our bathrooms. There are curtains in hospitals. So all of these product is the same, but they require a different kind of textile intervention and production. So if somebody is interested in how we inform, let's say, the unconventional uses of textiles, I would say unconventional because that's not something a person thinks of when they think of textiles in the first place. But those are very much the things which are used on everyday basis. Even let's say for that matter, the green fabric, or like the green synthetic fabric, which we use a lot in covering baskets or covering our sheds, and creating a very shaded cheap cover, that's also coming from the textile industry. So any kind of thing which is, let's say, woven and or knitted is something that comes under the purview of textiles. So the technology courses on textiles also, leave you with a lot of room for exploration, innovation, and creativity. It's just that it'll be directed towards more functionality, on where you're implementing your design thinking into how this textile will perform in a certain scenario. Lately, I have only dabbled with universities that I've interacted with, so I don't know from the larger scheme of things. But for a fact, I know that within India, obviously NID, rules for textiles, and after that, NIFT and Pearl come into the scene. In fact, like at Pearl, the focus on textiles has reduced a little. So I would say, like, NID would be number one, then NIFT, and then Pearl for textiles per se, not in terms of fashion. Fashion, Pearl and NIFT stand together, and in fact, sort of overshadow NID also when it comes to fashion. And in the global scenario, there are, which are very mainstream colleges, but they all have textile courses as well. So, I mean, I can just shoot out some names, but I wouldn't know which is the best in textile. So there's Parsons Schools in New York, which is the new school Parsons. And they have a Paris branch as well. And then there is London College of Fashion in London. There is Royal College of Arts in London, which is actually the number one college in the world for art and design. So Royal College of Arts is something which people really aim for. Central St. Martin's also focus on art and textile, which is again in London. Then there is FIT, Fashion Institute of Technology in New York, but I mean, that really like gives a very good information on how to make industry ready kind of bachelor or master's program, so that while you're learning your skill or your information, you're also very headstrong or informed about what is the demand of the industry in today's world. And similarly, there's this one other institute in France, but the only downside, it's only taught in French. If anybody is fluent with French, they can consider that. I'm forgetting the name. Never mind. I think they can look at design colleges in French, but there is this one college which is actually number one in French for textiles and fashion, and it's very renowned for its couture courses and like handmade textiles and heritage courses, but they're only offering it in French. Then apart from that, there is this one particular textile school in the world called Swedish School of Textiles, which is in Sweden. So that is something again which people can look at, because that is one of the very few colleges in the world which is only focusing on textiles, and not, I mean, the major focus is on textile, and that's why the name Swedish School of Textiles. That comes under University of Borås. So that's another school that they can look at. Other than that, there are Italian schools as well, like Domus and Marangoni and all these schools as well, which are doing exceptionally good. So they can look at that. I don't recommend these kind of courses to anyone, because again, it just touches the surface and you cannot get a very, very secure career of these certificate courses. But how they serve the purpose is that they're very good, let's say, window to what you might experience in the full-time profession. So let's say somebody is willing to or like planning to get into textile design as a profession. These certificate courses would be a good, let's say, touching it on the surface. But how it also helps is, let's say you're not interested in design, but in business of textiles. So then they could also like inform you or give you, let's say, the bare minimum of basic knowledge about it, so that when you hire a designer of textiles, or let's say you're interacting with a designer of textiles in your work, let's say you're coming from a management background and you want to get into the textile field, as an employee and managing textile sector. That's why like these kind of short-term courses will at least brush you up on what happens in the textile industry, how the supply chain works, how the whole manufacturing sector works, or how the design industry of textile works. So those kind of certificate courses are very, very relevant for people trying to do anything in the textile sector. But if you're trying to learn design on how to design textiles with that certificate course, your knowledge will be very limited. So you'll also need to be self-motivated enough to do a lot of work or research and do projects on your own end. So it's just that like in a short term or a certificate program, your the inputs you can get out of that university is limited, and your networking also becomes limited. But you can touch the surface and get to know basic things, and then you can explore further as and when you like. But if I talk about universities or colleges, I think the ones which I've already named, they all have these short-term programs or summer programs or one-year diplomas or 6 months or 1 month or evening programs, courses, which are certificate programs. So these are the kind of programs that everybody can look at. Um, but yeah, one program which I'll highly recommend is the one which I also took up at IIM Ahmedabad, but that is primarily from understanding the textile sector or from the business side of things, that how do you develop your textile practice as a designer? Because that course is particularly coming from IIM Ahmedabad. Obviously, it's a business program, but um, it's largely directed towards creative professionals. So anybody, let's say, who's a textile designer or who is planning to pursue textile design and thinking that how can they make money out of it later on, that program I will highly recommend, because how they make you think around business is very, very unique. And all the faculties are from their mainstream PGP and the MBA courses of IIM Ahmedabad. So they, while you're in the program, they'll directly tell you that uh, MBA student will think of this particular, let's say, aspect of business from this point of view. But as a creative professional, you need to view it and take a decision around this aspect of business from creative point of view. So, I mean, to give you an example, let's say, um, uh, your expertise is in creating printed fabrics, So, as a management professional, a regular MBA, you would create anything and everything under the sun, which is a printed fabric, and you'll basically follow the trend forecast and create printed fabrics and approach all kind of design houses to buy your fabrics. But as a textile designer, you'll put symbolism in it, you'll put some meaning and depth into it, you'll put some cultural relevance and heritage narrative into it. And so as a practitioner and not just a seller, so like I'm also selling my design services as a textile designer, I would pursue that business from a lens of selling more than just a fabric. I would then then my audience will become people who are also, let's say, cultural brands or cultural organizations who would want that kind of cultural depth in the product that they're manufacturing. So they would source from vendors like me who are already producing things which have more philosophical depth or cultural information attached to the product that they're selling. So this particular program of 6 months primarily trains that how, as a creative professional, you can retain your creative voice and not just make products for the heck of selling and whatever is available in the market. So you as a professional can have your independent identity and have your voice or your signature style preserved and still make money out of it. What I just spoke about, the diversity of options you have, is also a challenge, because it takes a lot of time and patience and switching roles to realize where your heart lies. The personal consciousness on whether you want to get into textiles for profits, or you want to get into textiles to create impact, and how much of proportion also you can keep if you want to balance both the things. So that's another dilemma which people face very early on, because the overall general consciousness in humans have arose right now, and we are aware about social and environmental issues. So person entering textiles will obviously be informed that, okay, there are handlooms available and all those things. So do they get into a mainstream, career where they are assured of very good salary and they have very good career growth, or they go into a more experimental or a more impactful career where, society and environment is impacted. So that kind of balance is also something which inhibits people or scares people initially. But again, I would give the same answer like I did before, that go by your intuition and go by what gives you the maximum learning initially in the field you're interested in or in the topics you're interested in. And don't look at the salary, and look at salary enough for you to sustain yourself during these learning years. And then once you have experience and you realize that, okay, you're not subpar, but you're way above the rest of the industry, then you sort of start charging the kind of amount you would want to expect for a lifestyle that you dream of.